Hi everyone. Today we're going to be reading the next section of Ratscalibur by Josh Lieb, and this is for the Gilbert Library's winter reading program. So here we go. Chapter 11. Yasleen Rat ran to her father to comfort him. She patted his arm and whispered soothing words into his ear until he stopped moaning. Joey noticed that one of the king's legs was bent and broken looking, like something awful had happened to it, and it had never healed right. It looked painful. Once the king had been quieted, Sir Aramis asked Joey to tell his story, from the beginning. When Joey described how motionless Gondorf had been when he left him, the king moaned a little. When Joey told how he had escaped the orange cat in the trash pile and showed them the scratches on his back, the princess gasped and said, "He escaped Rundle? He was in Rundle's den?" "What's that?" asked the vizier. "Surely you've heard of Rundle. She's the terror of the border to the eastern wildlands." "I have more important matters on my mind," answered the vizier, who turned back to Joey. "Please continue." Then Joey told about arriving in the village, the jelly bean, the spork, everything. When he was done, the vizier nodded sadly and said, "Well, there is little to do now but to submit to Salaman. His deadline for complete capitulation is tomorrow at midnight. Otherwise, the Black Claws will destroy Ravelon completely. We will have to do whatever he asks." "What do you mean?" said the princess, waving a paw at Joey. "He has drawn Ratscalibur. We have our hero." "Princess, please," protested Sir Aramis. "You saw the note. We must declare ourselves under Salaman's command, or his Black Claws will destroy Ravelon stone by stone. But we have our hero." "I don't know what you're talking about," said Joey. "I've delivered the message. Please, just turn me back into myself." "Some hero," said Brutilda. She had a low voice, but it was very musical. Like she kind of sang everything she said. That somehow made it scarier. She rolled toward Joey like a big, hairy slug. "Look at him. He's no hero, just a scrawny, jumped-up high realmer with his hand on a power he cannot begin to understand. Come, little boy, and give Ratscalibur to someone who knows how to use it." Joey didn't like being called a little boy, but he held out the spork to her anyway. "Here, take it." "No," the princess said, coming between them. "Brutilda, you have tried to take this sword countless times. It would not go to you." "I loosened it for him," protested the guinea pig. "No," repeated the princess. "Your pure strength had no effect on it. You know that." Brutilda lowered her head. The princess continued. "This boy has something else in him. What is it I cannot say, but Ratscalibur has chosen him. He is our hero." When Sir Aramis gave Joey a long look, he seemed to soften a little, as if a thought had occurred to him. "Maybe. I hope you're right, but it is a doubtful thing. Only Squirrelin can confirm if this boy truly fulfills the prophecy, or if the prophecy is a prophecy at all. Then he must go to Squirrelin," said Yasleen stubbornly. "That's who Gondorf was trying to see anyway." Joey had had enough. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "Stop telling me about prophecies or whatever. Seriously, I am not a hero. I'm just a kid, a human kid, and I need somebody to turn me back." The princess and Sir Aramis shared a look, and the princess shook her head. "Gondorf never taught me the art of transformation, and all the other magicians had fled this court." Joey felt his blood run ice cold. "Then I'm stuck forever, as a rat. Isn't there anyone who can change me back into a person?" Yasleen frowned. "That brings us right back around to Squirrelin." "Squirrelin," repeated Joey. "Yes, Squirrelin the Squidgician." "Let me guess," said Joey. "He's a squirrel who does squagic?" "Well, obviously," said Sir Aramis. "Now, what I'd like to know is—" But he didn't finish his question. He stopped and stared at something that had entered the room behind Joey. Before Joey could turn around to see it, he could feel it, a spicy scent tickling his fingers up his nose, a hot wind blowing on his back, and something was hugging him, wrapping itself around him and squeezing, something very hot and very wet and very scratchy, and Joey looked down as it curled around his waist. Very pink. "Hee hee," someone giggled. Joey turned. The white rat, Sir Parsifer, had entered, which would not have been very interesting, except he was still riding his cat, which had somehow shoved her head and shoulders into the throne room. She seemed determined to give Joey an all-over bath. "Be flattered, young one," said the knight, leaping down. "Checkers likes you." The cat purred and licked Joey's snout. "Parsifer," yelled Aramis, "how many times must I tell you that beast doesn't belong in the palace?" "I couldn't agree more, Sir Stick in the Mud, but until I find a place more worthy of her perfection, it will just have to do." The cat's tongue was now hugging all of Joey, slipping and squeezing around his whole body. He felt like he was the meat inside a burrito that was wrapped in a wet, woolly blanket instead of a tortilla. "Make her stop," pleaded Joey. Parsifer rapped the cat on the nose. "Cease, Checkers, cease. Our young savior has had enough." The tongue retreated, but not completely. It still tickled at Joey's belly. "Checky, behave," bellowed Parsifer, twisting the disobedient cat's ear. Checkers made an unhappy sound and pulled her tongue back into her mouth. Sir Parsifer made an apologetic face at Joey. "I really don't understand it. She's never acted that way before. You must taste uncommonly good." Parsifer gave Joey's shoulder a quick lick but seemed unimpressed. Personally, I don't get it." The knight drew his sword and bowed grandly before Joey. "Allow me to formally introduce myself. I am Parsifer, known to my enemies as Parsifer the Vain, known to my friends as Parsifer the Vain." He winked. I'm really very vain." "Better known as the Giggling Knight," put in Brutilda, who didn't seem to like Parsifer any more than she liked Joey. "Possibly, large one, possibly," replied Parsifer, "though I wouldn't know why." Then he giggled. "Hee hee hee." The princess looked at him impatiently. "We're in the middle of some very important business, "Oh, I know," said the knight, "which is why I have come to offer this young stripling my service." He knelt before Joey. "I am yours to command." Joey felt even more scared than he had when the cat had been licking him. What do I need your services for?" Parsifer gave a big, friendly smile. "Why, for your quest, of course." Chapter 12. Parsifer took a giant swallow of golden liquid out of a cup made from an acorn cap. "Stop this nonsense. Of course you're going on a quest." They were sitting in a long drinking hall. It had a very low ceiling and very long tables, and the chimney for the fireplace didn't seem to work, because the whole room was full of smoke. It was also full of rats. Big rats, tiny rats, fat rats, skinny rats, rats with no teeth, and rats with no hind legs, rats with too much fur, which sprouted out of their ears and down the middle of their backs like hair fountains. These were tough rats, and they had all been drinking and fighting and yelling a few minutes ago. But everyone had gone instantly silent as soon as Joey and Parsifer walked in. Parsifer hadn't been silent at all. He grabbed his cap full of golden liquid from a passing barmaid and loudly demanded a bowl of stew for Joey. Joey had never felt more out of place in his life. "Doesn't it bother you that everyone is watching us?" Parsifer shrugged. "I'm used to everyone watching me." He burped and giggled. "Hee hee hee." A very plump young barmaid approached and put a bowl of stew, freshly scooped from the pot over the fire, on the table in front of Joey. The bowl shook in her hand. She stared at Ratscalibur, which lay on the bench next to Joey, like it might jump up and bite her. "Thank you," said Joey, but before he finished, she shrieked and ran away. Joey was too hungry to care. He stuck his snout into the bowl and didn't make any noises but eating sounds for several minutes. The stew tasted incredible. After a while, he turned his gravy-stained nose up to Parsifer and asked, "What am I eating, by the way?" Parsifer had a funny smile on his face. "You plan to become human again, correct?" "As soon as possible," said Joey. Parsifer's smile widened. "Then I won't tell you what's in the stew. It might be an unpleasant memory later." Joey thought about that for a second, then dived back into the stew. Parsifer let Joey eat in silence, but as soon as Joey started licking the bottom of the bowl, he said, "Now to resume. Of course, you're going on a quest just as soon as the stable hands finish getting our cats and saddlebags ready. It's the only way to save Ravelon, and the only way you'll ever get back home." "What's Ravelon?" "Where you are now, Uther's kingdom. There's Brigadoon on the north, Piecemeal and the Bell Garden to the south, Gran Concommo to the east, and a million more besides. But Ravelon, fair Ravelon, this was the brightest pearl of the Low Realm, but now there is Salaman." Parsifal took another swig of the golden stuff. And all our friends to the north, south, and east have abandoned us. Salaman is another kingdom? Parsifal shook his head. Salaman is a magician. No one had ever heard of him until a year ago when his black claws first arrived. They brought a note from him demanding a weekly tribute or he would destroy Ravelon. Some of us wanted to fight back, but black claws are strong, and the king is not himself. The vizier thought it best to give tribute and hope that things would get better. Parsifal giggled. Things have not gotten better. They rarely do they? He giggled even harder. Now, all the strongest knights and magicians have fled Ravelon, and all we were left with is those who are too damaged. He gestured, and the battle-scarred rats around him. Or too loyal, and he tapped himself on the chest, to leave. Joey saw Drattleby, the rat Parsifal had jousted with, glaring at them from across the room. Which kind is he? Wondered Joey, damaged or loyal? Joey didn't see what any of this had to do with him. Why don't you just go fight Salami Man? Salaman, corrected Parsifal. Whatever, you're a knight, right? Am I? Sometimes I wonder, said Parsifal. Anyway, I don't know where to find Salaman. Nobody's ever seen him. There are rumors, of course, that he's a giant rat, midnight black, fangs like spearheads, real boogeyman stuff. All we know for sure is that he's immensely powerful. Controlling black claws is no easy thing. Their brains are so small, only the most cunning Agic can ensnare them. He waved his empty cup at the barmaid. Bring me another, love. That's why Gondorf went to seek help from Squirrelin. Gondorf was strong, but Squirrelin is even stronger. He was Gondorf's teacher. The old fellow saved Ravelon more than a few times in the past. Joey said, so Squirrelin's like a super good guy. Parsifal's smile stretched so wide it covered his entire white muzzle. Squirrelin is awful, tiny, mean, secretive, greedy, but you can't hold that against him. He's a squirrel, and Squagic is a harsh tonic. It always brings out the worst in them. A rat eavesdropping nearby nodded. Squirrelin is the most powerful worker of Agic ever known, so it's understandable that the Squagic has some less than positive effects on his personality. He keeps to himself, far from the wars, diseases, and emotions that plague us lesser creatures. But Aramis thought that if anyone could get Squirrelin to help us, it would be Gondorf. He was our last hope. Parsifal paused for a second. I think you know how that ended. Joey looked at his pink rat claws. He knew exactly how that ended. But then, a new hope. A stranger appears from nowhere and plucks Ratscalibur from her petrified scone, where she's rested these many years, ever since Uther's great-grandfather Axel Stoneheart stuck her there. And this stranger, perhaps, will fulfill the prophecy. What prophecy? A poem we say around here. No one's sure where it came from. Nurses sing it to babies in their cradles. Some think that's all it is, just a nursery rhyme. It goes on for a while, but the part that's pertinent to you goes, and here Parsifal took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and recited in a high-pitched sing-song tone, Ravelon thrives, Ravelon bustles, mercy and beauty and wisdom and muscle. And old Axel Spork slumbers stuck in the scone, unneeded by rat kings on Ravelon's throne. But as seasons change, so must Ravelon too. All good times must end, the reckoning's due. Ratscalibur rests whilst Ravelon turns, crops drop to dust, Ravelon burns. Ratscalibur dreams, Ratscalibur sleeps, till babies hunger, mothers weep. Then will a hero's sword uptake, Ratscalibur sings, Ratscalibur wakes. The little white rat paused as if he hoped he could live in the poem a little while longer. Then he shook his head and opened his eyes. The entire room had listened to him recite. The only other sound was the soft snap of wood in the fireplace. Now everyone was staring at Joey again, just as intently as when he'd first walked in. Hundreds of eyes, wide open, were shining blankly at him. It was almost too much to bear. So that look in their eyes, whispered Joey, that's hope. Parsifal gestured toward the door with an elegant paw. Maybe out there in the courtyard, he said, but these eyes in here, These are the eyes of soldiers who fought and suffered and grown old on the battlefield. These eyes have seen blood and death and real heroism. No, that's not hope you see in these eyes, Percifer giggled. He, it's disappointment. As if to punctuate the word, Drattleby suddenly stood up and yelled, "This skinny boy is our savior?" He sounded completely disgusted. He threw his cup to the floor with a clatter and stormed out. Percifer squeezed Joey's paw. "But you'll show them, won't you, lad?" Joey didn't know what to say. He didn't want to show anything to anybody. He just wanted to go home. "Why are you telling me all this terrible stuff?" Percifer stopped smiling for a second. What kind of hero would you be if you didn't know what you were facing? Then Brutilda entered and stood in the doorway, breathing heavily. "The cats are ready." Joey and Percifer followed Brutilda out the door. A long line of cats stood in the courtyard, with water bottles and other provisions strapped to their sides. The cat in the middle was... "Checkers!" squealed Percifer. "Your tack is a mess!" He rushed to tend to his black and white mount. Joey stared at the cats. Was he actually expected to ride one of these beasts? But he didn't get a chance to wonder long. A set of claws latched around his upper arms in an iron grip and yanked. Joey found himself being dragged across the courtyard by Brutilda, who wasn't even looking at him. What are you doing?" Joey spluttered, but the giant didn't bother to answer. She dragged him through the dirt, past a guard who didn't do anything to help Joey, in through a little door at the side of the palace, and down an incredibly steep, dark staircase before Joey could even yell out, "Help!" "Is this how it ends?" thought Joey, "murdered in a basement by a guinea pig?" At the bottom of the stairs, Brutilda shoved him through a gap in some thick cloth, and he found himself back in the throne room. He looked behind him, but the old tapestry he'd been pushed through had swung shut, and Brutilda hadn't followed. Uther still sat on the throne, completely unmoved since the last time Joey had seen him. Hugging his legs and kneeling at his feet was his daughter, Princess Yasleen. Her eyes were squeezed shut, and she was whispering something. It seemed like a very private moment. Joey was sure he shouldn't be there, and he was just starting to wonder if Brutilda actually would murder him if he backed out through the tapestry, when Yasleen opened her eyes and said, "Thank you for coming. Please step closer." Reluctantly, Joey walked toward the princess and the king. He found himself staring at the old rat's vacant, unseeing face. "This is the great King Uther." As if she could read his mind, Yasleen said, "He wasn't always like this." Joey looked away from Uther, embarrassed. Yasleen continued, "Until a few years ago, he was the strongest, wisest, bravest rat king in the Low Realm. The most respected and the most feared since Axel, or even Ajax. There are countless rats and others who owe him their lives. Just ask Brutilda." Joey thought it was highly unlikely he would ever do that. The princess continued, "But my mother died in an accident. She fell down the great staircase in the southern tower, and something changed in him after that. He didn't grow weak right away, he just lost some of his will. One day, 2 years ago, he was wounded while helping Gronkonkoma repel invaders from the savage river. Perhaps his grief had made him careless. Sir Aramis was by his side in battle and carried him home. We thought with a little rest his leg would heal, but instead it became more twisted and poisoned than ever, and his mind had been poisoned along with it. But," she said, and then repeated emphatically, "but his spirit is not all gone. There are a few good days mixed in with the many bad. King Uther is still in there." She looked up at Joey imploringly. "That's why we have to reach Squirrel Inn. That's why we have to defeat Salaman. I can't let anyone steal his kingdom while the true king, my father, lives." Joey nodded. He understood. It had been just him and Mom as long as he could remember. Mostly Mom working and working to make sure Joey had enough to eat and a bed to sleep in and clothes to wear. Even taking this job in the city, Joey knew that she had done that for him. If anyone ever tried to hurt Mom, there wasn't anything Joey wouldn't do to protect her. But he didn't understand why they needed him. "You're a magician," he said. "Why don't you just send, a psychic message to Squirrel Inn so he'll come and save the day?" Yasleen shook her head. "It doesn't work that way. You can't send complicated messages through magic. At most, you can say, "Come now," or "Stay away," and then, as if she could read Joey's mind again, she said quickly, "And if you think Squirrelin would come just because I said, 'Come now,' well, you don't know Squirrelin. He is a stalwart friend of Ravelon, but he takes some convincing to do anything." There was a rustling behind Joey. Brutilda had entered through the tapestry. She nodded at the princess, who said, "We must leave." "But there's one more thing you deserve to know," she hesitated, then said, "Considering all the cloaking spells Gondorff was traveling under, there's only one way the Black Claws could have found him." She hesitated again, so Brutilda finished the thought for her. "Salaman must have a spy in the king's court." Joey's mind spun. "Wait," he said. "The bad guy knows we're coming? Why are we even trying then?" The princess stood, kissed her father on the cheek, and turned to Joey. "Because we have no choice," she said, and then she walked through the tapestry with Brutilda. Joey stood there, alone for a moment in the silent throne room. Because we have no choice. She was right. If he wanted to get back to Mom, if he wanted to become Joey again. His thoughts were interrupted by a dry tickle on his wrist. He looked up to see that Uther had reached out to him with a feeble paw. A spark of something was in the old man's wet eyes. Then he whispered so softly that Joey wasn't sure he'd heard it. Maybe he just felt it. "Thank you." When the spark was out and the king's eyes went cloudy again, still Joey mustered a "You are welcome, your majesty," before he turned to climb the stairs. His mind was fixated on one thought. He had no choice. Chapter 14. Joey had never ridden a camel, but he bet it must be a lot like riding a cat. For every step the cat took forward, it felt like it was taking 2 steps up and 2 steps down. He'd ridden a horse one time at summer camp, but this was different. This made his little rat stomach do flip-flops. "Oh, the look on your face," giggled Parsifer, who was a little ahead, riding Checkers. "Don't tell me you're mount sick. Yasleen loaned you the smoothest cat in her stable." Joey felt like throwing up, but he didn't want to give Parsifer the satisfaction. "I'll get used to it," he said. He scratched the back of his cat's head so that the cat wouldn't think Joey blamed him. He was really a very nice cat. A big black Tom named Squamish. But riding Squamish was like being strapped to a trampoline in an earthquake, and that's when he wasn't jumping from building to building. They were traveling across rooftops now. Yasleen led the way, riding her snow-white cat, Questel. Then Parsifer and Joey, with Aramis riding right behind Joey, and sour Brutilda riding an enormous ginger cat named Bicker, bringing up the rear. "I thought cats ate rats," said Joey. "Normal cats do," said Parsifer, "but if you find a kitten and raise it," he twisted Checker's right ear, "well, you'll find no more loyal comrade in the world." "Do cats talk?" asked Joey. "I've never met one who could," Parsifer said, "but I think they probably would if they ever found anything worth saying." He twisted Checker's other ear. The cat grinned. Talking to Parsifer was exhausting. Joey was never sure if the little knight actually meant what he was saying. Still talking beat, listening to himself think. "How long do we have to ride?" "Not long," said Parsifer. "Hopefully no more than a day." "A whole day?" Joey gasped. This thing seemed like it was going to stretch out forever. Poor Mom. Possibly longer, depending on what we run into. Of course, we can't go longer than tomorrow night, or we won't have any kingdom to go home to. Parsifer looked at Joey's face and giggled again. "Hee hee hee. You are positively the least heroic hero I've ever run across. It's really very amusing, but Squirrelin will know what to do with you. The only thing I want Squirrelin to do is turn me back into a person." Parsifer kept smiling. "From what I've seen of people, I'd rather stay a rat." Sir Aramis's cat, a sleek gray beast named Maeve, pulled up alongside Joey and Squamish. Aramis leaned into Joey. "You're still not convinced you're a hero." Joey put his hand on Ratscalibur, which was now tied securely to his side with a piece of dental floss. He wished it would make him feel brave or strong, but he didn't feel anything. The handle wasn't even warm anymore. I know I'm not a hero, said Joey. I'm sorry, but I'm not. I get picked last for kickball. Then he added, You don't think I'm a hero either, do you? Sir Aramis sighed. I would like to believe, but I'm a practical rat. I have a hard time putting faith in a prophecy that my sisters taught me while we were skipping rope. They had come to the edge of another building, and Aramis called ahead to Yisleen. Princess, halt! This is the western border! The rats all jumped off their cats and looked around. Sir Aramis stood at the edge of the roof, where Ravelon ends and the Wild West begins. No kings hold sway in the land beyond, just wild animals, obeying no law but their own hunger. He pointed to a wide green park about 8 blocks away. Joey knew about that park. He and Mom were supposed to go visit it today. There, in the middle of that bramble, you will find the lair of the Squidgician. Joey took a deep breath. Instantly, his nose told him exactly where he needed to go. The vizier turned to Yisleen. Princess, is there no way I can convince you to return with me and leave this quest to the others? Yisleen shook her head stubbornly. This quest is our last chance to survive. If it fails, our defeat will be final. We will have to submit to Salaman. Uther will step down. Ravelon will be no more. As the last tradition in Uther's realm, it is my duty to aid and protect these adventurers as best I can. Aramis looked like he wanted to say something more, but then he stopped, because he saw it would be hopeless. Joey could see that Aramis really was a practical rat. Well then, said Aramis, I wish you luck on your journey. Now I must return to my palace by the king. Ow! Shouted Joey. Something was burning him in the side. He looked down, expecting to see that his fur was on fire, but the only thing there was Ratscalibur, glowing faintly. And then he felt a cold wind beat down on his head. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Look out! Joey yelled, just as the crows swooped down at them. The other rats dropped flat to the ground, except for Yisleen, who stood frozen in place. Joey was frozen too, as he watched the crows snatch her up in his black claws and fly away. And that's where we're stopping today. Keep an eye out for the next one. Okay, bye.